You know that moment when life seems to crumble like a house of cards? When everything you thought was solid, dreams, relationships, job, simply slips through your fingers and leaves only pain and frustration. It's as if the word loss would define who you are and not just what you have experienced. If this describes you, take a deep breath, because I have something powerful to tell you. What you lost will return with honor. Yes, the promise of restitution is alive, and heaven is working behind the scenes to turn pain into victory, faith renewed, and a purpose even bigger than before. Fasten your seatbelt, because today we are going to talk about something that is not just an empty promise. No, it is the certainty that God, in right time, will give you back more than you lost, will give you back with purpose, treatment, and internal transformation. And do you know why I say this? Because even Job, who lost everything, was restored double. Hannah, who wept in silence, received Samuel and an eternal purpose. And David, even fleeing from cave to cave, became king. If they experienced restitution, you can too, and you will. Now, before we dive headfirst into this video, I ask you, subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications, and share it with someone who needs to hear this message of faith and hope. This is not just another video, it is an opportunity for transformation. In fact, I have a challenge for you. Write in the comments, I believe in the restitution and victory that heaven is preparing for me. Do this as an act of faith, a powerful declaration that will make hell tremble. So, are you up for the challenge? Because what's coming is strong, it's healing, it's renewal. Let's go together? You know that feeling of emptiness that takes over when something we believe to be eternal simply falls apart. That love that turned into pain, the job that seemed stable and suddenly disappeared like smoke, the dream that seemed so certain but collapsed like a house of cards. That is the mark of loss, a mark that hurts deeply and sometimes seems to never heal. I know, because all of us at some point in our lives have been through this. And there is no point in pretending that everything is fine, putting on a smile and saying everything is fine, when inside your soul is in pieces. But you know what? It is precisely in this pain that the journey of resilience. Because as difficult as it may be to accept, losing is also part of the path that leads us to purpose. I know it seems contradictory, but think about it. How many times have we thought that something was all we had, when in fact it was just a step towards something even bigger? Promise, God's life was never without challenges, but rather a restoration that comes with glory. When Job lost everything, family, health, friends, he didn't know that God had plans to give him back double. But deep down in the ashes, he kept the faith, even when nothing made sense. This is where I want to tell you something that can change everything. God does not ignore your tears. He sees each one of them and understands your pain in a way that no one else does. What you have lost, whether it be a relationship, a job, or even that sparkle in your eyes, does not define your worth, nor what God will still do in your life. Internal transformation, it starts exactly when you face the pain head-on and decide that it won't stop you. If you ask me, but how do I deal with this in practice? I tell you, first, allow yourself to feel the pain. Crying is not weakness, it is part of the healing. Second, do not isolate yourself. Talk to someone you trust, seek support. Sometimes a simple venting to a friend can bring the clarity that was missing. And above all, do not give up on dreaming, because hope, it is the fuel that keeps us standing when everything around us seems to be falling apart. You know that book I always recommend? Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill. It may not seem like it has much to do with faith, but in it he talks about the importance of maintaining positive thinking and believing that you can achieve what you want. It's the same with faith. Victory, that God promises, even when everything seems to have been taken away from you, promises still standing, waiting for the right time to be fulfilled. So, my friend, take a deep breath. This pain is not the end, it is just the beginning, restitution that heaven is preparing for you. And you know what's best? It will be with honor, because God doesn't give back just anything. He gives back better, bigger, and stronger. And this is not self-help talk, it's a promise from someone who doesn't lie. Want to know how this story continues? Hold on tight, because in the next topic, I'm going to tell you about the example of Job, a guy who lost everything, but found it in faith the strength to live twice as long. Ready? Then let's go together. When we talk about loss, it is impossible not to remember Job. The guy became a symbol of patience and faith in the midst of chaos. If you think you have already lost a lot, take a look at his story. He lost his family, health, wealth, friends. All that was left was faith. And to tell the truth, even that was hanging by a thread. Just imagine, everything he had was cruelly taken away, and, to make matters worse, his friends even came to him saying that he must have done something wrong. Isn't that crazy? But do you know what impresses me most about this story? It's that even in the midst of the ashes, Job did not lose his ability to recognize God's sovereignty. He said, "The Lord gave, and the Lord has taken away. Blessed be the name of the Lord." Job 121. Man, that's the strength of someone who understands that God doesn't lose control even when everything seems off track. And that's where the promise. In the end, God restored everything double. Seriously, it wasn't just returning what he had lost. It was returning it with purpose, with victory, with honor. You may ask yourself, but why would God allow such a difficult situation? And then I tell you, it is in the fire of trial that we discover the solidity of our faith. It's not comfortable to hear this, I know, but think, how will you experience the restoration if you don't understand the value of what was lost? Job not only got back what he lost, he was transformed inside. The man who came out of pain was not the same man who went into it. He received more, but most importantly, he became someone stronger, wiser, more full of hope and ready to fulfill a purpose bigger. The historia de Job nos mostra que a restoration, God's love, goes far beyond what we can imagine. Sometimes we just want what we lost back, just the way it was before. But God doesn't do it that way. He is an expert in giving us renew, in returning us improved, with experiences that prepare us for something even greater. And this applies to everything: relationships, jobs, dreams that fell apart. God does not only return what was lost, he returns it stronger, with testimony, with double anointing. Now, I want to give you a practical tip. When you are passing through the desert of loss, remember what happened to Job. Write it down on your phone, put a post-it on the fridge, do whatever it takes to remember. This will remind you that God is an expert in transforming tragedies into testimonies, tears into lessons, and defeats into victory. And more, he does everything in right time, not in hours. That's the secret of faith that does not die, even when the ground collapses. So hold on tight, because there's still a lot to talk about. In the next topic, we'll understand why restitution, God's love, is not just external. It affects our identity, who we are inside. And that's what makes it all worth it. Are you ready? Let's continue this journey. When we talk about restitution, most people imagine getting back everything they lost. Job, marriage, possessions, health, as if it were just giving back what was lost in our lives. But the great thing is that God is not only interested in what you lost, but in who you became after it. Loss. A promise. God's work is not just about returning what is gone, but about restoring your identity, healing your wounds, and taking you to a new level of purpose. This is what the Bible calls abundant life. You know, that pain that seems like it won't go away? That emptiness that remains even after so much crying? Well, God doesn't just want to fill you with things or people. He wants to rebuild you from the inside, align your heart with Him, purpose of Him, and make you see life with new eyes. Therefore, internal transformation is so important in this process. It's as if he was saying, before I give you back everything you've lost, I want to strengthen you, heal your wounds, heal your scars, and teach you to walk with your head held high. Remember the story of Hannah? Not only did she receive Samuel as an answer to her prayer, but she was also transformed from a barren woman into a purposeful mother. Samuel was not just a child, he was a prophet, a judge, and a leader in Israel. This shows that God's restitution is always fraught with purpose. And David, he didn't just go from a cave to a throne. He went from a persecuted man to a mature king with scars that became badges of honor. That's what God wants to do with you. Not just give back what you lost, but turn the pain into healing testimony. Now, I'm going to tell you a truth that may hurt, but that will set you free. As long as you're focused only on what you've lost, you'll lose sight of who God wants you to be. Because sometimes, in order for us to receive the I renew, we need to let go of what was left behind. There is no point in trying to hold on to old things if God is preparing something new. And this new phase is so grand that it will make yesterday seem small compared to what he is going to do. It is not an exaggeration, it is promise. So, I want to give you some advice. Open your heart to this internal transformation. Let God work in the silence, in the invisible, in the intimate. Do you know that room where you lock yourself to cry? That is also a place of restoration. Sometimes the greatest miracle is not what we see, but what God does within us. Faith needs to be built before it can be shown. And when the time comes, what God will do in your life will be so powerful that it will leave everyone speechless. So, are you ready to take the next step? Because in the next topic we will talk about right time of God. That moment when it seems like he has forgotten about us, but in fact he is working everything perfectly. Don't be discouraged. Come with me, because there is more. Oh, how hard it is to wait, right? It seems like time passes differently when we're in the middle of something, loss. Every second becomes an eternity, and our minds begin to bombard us with doubts. Has God forgotten about me? Has promise, wasn't it for me? Did I make a mistake somewhere? And that's when discouragement sets in, and we think that all that's left is pain and regret. But let me tell you something that might change your perspective. God doesn't work in our time. He works in right time. The Bible makes this very clear in Ecclesiastes 3:11. God has made everything beautiful in its time. This means that he is neither late nor early. He arrives at the right time, when everything lines up perfectly, like a jigsaw puzzle that fits together. Do you know why? Because he doesn't want to give you just what you lost, but something that is I renew. May it come full of purpose that transforms you from within. Sometimes waiting is the process that strengthens your faith. It is as if God were preparing the soil for the seed of victory bloom abundantly. Job is a classic example of this. He lost everything, and it seemed like God had turned his back. But in the end, right time, God restored it double. It was not in the time Job wanted, but in the perfect time to fulfill the purpose greater than God had for him. And do you know what's most beautiful? Job came out of that ordeal stronger, wiser, more full of hope. This is what God wants to do with you. Now think about it. How many times have you asked God for something and it didn't happen right away? How many times have you prayed, cried out, and silence was the only answer? Well, my friend, this silence is not abandonment. It is preparation. God works in the invisible before acting in the visible. He moves pieces that we can't even imagine. He creates opportunities that only he can see. It's like that song that we hear, and suddenly, in the chorus, everything makes sense. It is there, in the chorus of life, that the purpose reveals itself. So, don't despair if your restitution hasn't arrived yet. It's not because God has forgotten you. It's because he's building something much bigger than you can imagine. Sometimes, He holds back the blessing not to punish you, but to prepare you to receive it fully. He knows that without a structure, you won't be able to handle the weight of the loss, victory that He has for you. So breathe, take one step at a time, strengthen your faith. If you need to, read the book of Job again, meditate on Ecclesiastes 3:11, and remember, God does not delay, He is careful. And when He comes with their restitution, it will be so complete that you will look back and say, it was worth the wait. In the next topic, we will talk about the examples of Hannah and David, two stories that show how restitution comes with purpose and healing. Are you ready to dive into these stories and get inspired? So, let's go. You know, when we think our story has ended loss, that's when God begins to write the most beautiful chapter. Want to see? Let's talk about Hannah and David. Two examples that show that restitution, God's will, is never just a return. It is a turnaround full of purpose, cure, and victory. Starting with Hannah, the woman who went up to the temple every year and cried, prayed, and cried out for a child. She lived the pain of being barren, a pain that went beyond the physical absence of a child. It was a wound in her soul, a social shame, a constant struggle between hope and despair. And what made the difference? The faith of Hannah. She did not give up. She presented her pain to God with sincere tears, and Samuel was born. But God did not give Hannah just one son. No, He gave a purpose. Samuel became a prophet, judge, and leader in Israel. God transformed zealous in a mission, the pain in testimony, the cry in legacy. Now think about David, a boy anointed king, and suddenly he becomes a fugitive. He slept in caves, was hunted like a criminal. It seemed that promise had been torn in half. But deep down, God was using that time to forge character, to teach humility, to strengthen the faith of David. When he finally ascended the throne, he was no longer just a shepherd. He was a man after God's own heart, ready to rule with justice and wisdom. Restitution, God for David, was not just the throne. It was the maturity, strength, and vision of a leader that he needed to have to fulfill his mission. Purpose that God had for him. Do you see how God works? He doesn't just give you back what you lost, He gives you back a better you. He doesn't just give you back dreams, He gives you back identity, purpose, internal transformation. Because for God, your story is much more than material possessions or prestigious positions. He is interested in the person you are becoming in the process. He wants to heal what was left wounded, strengthen what the pain left weak, and rekindle the flame of hope which often goes out in the middle of the storm. Now, pay attention. Just as Hannah and David lived moments of silence before the victory, you may also be going through this time of apparent abandonment. But don't be discouraged. God is writing your story. And if He allowed something to be taken from you, it's because He has something much bigger and better to give you. It's not punishment, it's preparation. It's not the end, it's the beginning of a new chapter, full of purpose, cure, and victory. The next topic, we will dive into this journey from the inside out. Because internal transformation is the key to living the restitution of God in a complete way. And I will show you how this transformation begins in the silence of the heart. Ready? So, let's go. You know, when we feel that everything around us is still, that nothing is happening, and we get the impression that God has forgotten about us. Well, that is precisely when He is working most intensely, in the invisible, in the depths of the soul, in the corners of the heart where no one else can reach. It is in the silence that internal transformation begins, and it is from this transformation that the victory that people look for so much. God is in no hurry. Remember, He works in the right time because He knows that before He gives you back what you lost, He needs to prepare you to receive what comes with it, purpose. There is no point in him restoring the relationship if your heart is still hurt. There is no point in him giving you your dream job if the fear of losing it again is still dominating you. Restoration, God's return, is not just about what you'll get back, but about who you'll be when you get it back. Job is an example of this. Before he received double of everything, he had to go through a process of transformation. In the midst of the ashes, when everything seemed over, he declared, "I know that my Redeemer lives, and that at the last he will stand upon the earth." Job 19:25, faith firm, was the foundation of restitution. God used suffering to polish Job from within, to strengthen his hope and prepare him to live the promise. Because Thelos that he lived was not for nothing. She had a purpose to rebuild Job from the inside out. You know what I learned from this? That God is an expert at working behind the scenes. While you think he is silent, he is setting the stage, so that when the victory arrives, no one can say it was luck or coincidence. It will be clear that it was God who did it, and no one will be able to steal that glory. And that is what he wants to do in your life too. Let me give you some advice. From someone who has been through deserts, don't underestimate the time of silence. It is during this time that God shapes your character, heals old wounds, and strengthens your faith, and gives you the emotional structure to receive what he has for you. Because he doesn't just want to restore you on the outside, he wants to restore you on the inside. He wants to give you back the identity that lost tried to steal now, so that you don't just stick to theory. I'm going to give you a practical tip. Take advantage of this waiting time to invest in your relationship with God. Read the Bible, meditate on texts like Psalm 23, Philippians 3:13-14, and Job 42. Write down in a notebook or on a post-it note the following: promises that God has already made you. Well, even when you feel nothing, it is in this nothing that he works everything. And when the time comes, you will see that every tear, every sleepless night, every outburst were the seeds of a testimony powerful that will impact lives. In the next topic, we will talk about the importance of standing firm in faith, even when everything seems to fall apart. Because the faith, it's not just about believing when everything is going well, but mainly about trusting when nothing makes sense. Shall we continue? Oh, my friend, who has never felt like throwing everything up in the air when life doesn't make sense, right? When the pain of loss presses the chest, when the promises seems distant, when faith sways like a sail in the middle of a hurricane. It is at that exact moment that we discover what it means to remain firm in faith, that faith that does not depend on circumstances, that is greater than what we see. The Bible is full of stories of people who remained steadfast even when everything said otherwise. Job, for example, was crushed by pain, lost everything he had, and still had to listen to judgments from those who didn't understand what he was going through. Even so, he declared, "Though he slay me, yet will I trust in him." Job 13:15. That's what I'm talking about. The faith that resists chaos, that clings to the promise, even when reality screams that it's over. Because the victory, it is not just for those who have all the answers, but for those who choose to trust in the God who does not lie. And I know it's not easy. When we look at life and see everything falling apart, dreams, plans, relationships, we feel like questioning whether God really cares. But that's where the secret comes in. Faith true does not depend on what we understand, but on what we believe. And believing is believing that God is good, even when everything seems bad. It is knowing that he has a purpose bigger, even when you see no way out. You know that saying, God writes straight with crooked lines. Well, he writes straight, but sometimes he uses crooked lines to teach us to trust. Because internal transformation, what he does while we wait, is as important as the restoration that he brings. Waiting strengthens, matures, aligns our vision. It is like training to prepare us for victories even bigger. I'll give you a practical tip for this time of waiting. Cultivate gratitude. Be thankful for the little things, for the people who are still by your side, for your health, for the air you breathe. Gratitude is a fertilizer for faith. And don't stop talking to God, even if it's just to say, "Lord, I don't understand anything, but I trust in you." This simple prayer is powerful because it shows him that you have chosen to remain firm, that you will not give up in the middle of the process. Now I want to remind you, your story is not over. Promise is still standing, and God is faithful to fulfill every word. Even when the silence seems deafening, he is working, and restitution comes, not the way you want it, but the way you need it. That is faith. In the next topic, we will talk about something very special, the invitation to walk together, to be part of a community that strengthens you on your journey. Because no one was made to fight alone. Are you ready? Then come with me. It's time to talk about something that you may not even realize how important it is in your journey of faith, the strength of walking with a community. You know that saying, alone you go faster, but together you go further. Well, in life with God, this is not just nice to say, it is necessary. Because the enemy knows that in loss, in mourning, in pain, it is easier to attack you if you are isolated. And that is why the Bible speaks so much about communion, about being together, about not abandoning the congregation. Because there are times when we need a friendly shoulder to cry on, to stay strong in promise. Remember Job? Even in the midst of tragedy, he had friends. True, they weren't much help at first, but they were still there, and God used Job's intercession for them as part of the healing process. Restitution. This shows that even in the midst of difficulties, the community is part of the treatment, of the process of internal transformation that God works in us. And it's no different today. We live in a world where it's easy to hide behind a screen, pretending that everything is fine when it's not. But God calls you to something greater, a living community where you can share your pains, your joys, your victories. A place where you can talk openly about your struggles without fear of being judged, because everyone there understands what it means to walk by faith. Here on the channel, we are building this, a space where you are not just another subscriber, but part of a family that prays together, that shares experiences, that celebrates each I renew. When you sign up, turn on notifications and comment, "God will restore me." You're not just pressing a button. You're saying, "I'm part of this promise. I'm along for the ride." This is powerful because it strengthens your hope and that of whoever reads your comment. You know those days when you're almost giving up. Sometimes it's a comment from someone here in the community that lifts you up. It's a word of encouragement, faith, and the testimony from someone who has already overcome the same battle you are facing. So don't underestimate the power of walking together. This is where we find support, consolation, practical advice, and also challenges that make us grow. So I invite you, subscribe to the channel, activate the bell, comment, and share with anyone who needs to hear this message. Don't keep this to yourself. Let God use your life to bring hope for others. Because, in the end, the victory of one is the inspiration of many, and your story will be testimony that God fulfills his promises, no right time, with purpose and honor. Now that we've come this far, the next step is to conclude this journey with a powerful reflection and a call to action. Are you ready? Let's go. Now that we have gone through each of these topics together, tell me, what has remained strongest? In your heart, was it the example of Job, who even in the ashes of pain declared, "I know that my Redeemer lives"? Or was it Hannah, who after years of waiting received not only a son, but a purpose that impacted generations? Or was it David who turned the cave into a training ground to become the greatest king of Israel? Regardless of what impacted you, the most one thing is certain: God does not waste pain. He transforms losses in victories, tears in testimonies, deserts in renewals. So I ask you, are you ready to live this restoration? To let God work in your life, right time, His way? Because, my friend, this journey of restitution is not just about getting back what was lost, it's about becoming who you were meant to be. And God is calling you to do this, today, right now. So don't stop here. Subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications, and share this video with someone who needs to hear it. If God put this message in your path, it's not by chance. It's because He's still writing your story, and He doesn't end stories in the middle of a chapter. He's faithful to the end. And to end with a bang, leave this phrase in the comments: God will restore me with purpose, with honor, and with glory. Write this as a commitment, as a declaration of faith, because I am sure when you declare it, heaven will move in your favor. So, let's go together. Your story is not over yet. What God has for you is too big to stay stuck in the past. Let's live the purpose of victory and the I renew that He prepared.